Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Before we get into tonight's stories, just wanted to give you guys a quick update. Quite a lot going on at the moment, as I've been saying in the recent videos. Currently putting together, or building should I say, the website, as I want to draw some more attention and obviously give ourselves a bit more independence away from YouTube. Hopefully, as I mentioned before, in a couple of months' time we should be able to reach out and get some merchandise going. And there's a store functionality, of course, on that website. There'll be a video functionality and, of course, the blog. Thank you all so much for the amazing support over the last few weeks. There's been a huge boost in the views and also the subscriptions. A big thank you and a welcome to all of you new subscribers. I hope you enjoyed the channel, and obviously the community or family that we have here is fantastic, so do get involved. But anyway, that will all be revealed very soon. Again, let me know what you think down below in the comments, guys. Please do like and share. Without further ado, let's get into tonight's first story, entitled Have You Heard of the Beast on Lincoln Way? Let's get straight into that. Watch out for the Bigfoot, Tara called out as I was putting on my boots. Come on now. That's a silly urban legend, it's just that. Silly. The only thing lurking around those houses are bums and bugs. I know, I sounded confident in my response, but there was a hint of anxiety building in my chest. There were always rumours about why everyone seemed to just drop everything and leave their homes on Lincoln Way. A few years ago, the story shifted from they were paid to leave to they were forced out by a monster. Skeptics debated and argued and joked about it on Facebook, while believers travelled to explore the mysterious abandoned street. The local cops hated their town's newfound fame. They suddenly went from occasionally having to check for vagrants squatting in the empty houses to being forced to patrol an area regularly to chase off urban explorers and, of course, ghost hunters. A lot of people were relieved, and a lot of them were disappointed when it was announced that all 16 houses remaining on Lincoln Way were going to be torn down. It wasn't all that surprising, really. There had already been 2 pretty big fires on the street since its popularity soared, and the already dilapidated houses quickly became even more run down from all of the foot traffic and vandals. It was dangerous, and the risk wasn't keeping anyone away. I was just happy for the work. The company I normally worked for wasn't doing so hot, so the winter layoffs came to some of us a bit sooner than normal. Unemployment was helping to keep the power on, but I could see the stress building in Tara's eyes every time we planned a trip to the grocery store. She normally had a few more months to plan for my seasonal bouts of occasional side jobs and more frequent couch surfing. I pulled up to Lincoln Way around 6 AM. The boss wanted us here early today so he could lead a safety meeting before we began. I had grown up just across the river, so the area itself was familiar and comfortable. But I had to admit that the decrepit buildings behind the ginormous "No Trespassing" sign held an eerie air around them. That anxiety in my chest bubbled a bit more for a moment. After hearing the same spiel about hard hats and shit that I've heard a million times before, we got to work. I won't bore you with stories of operating machinery and lewd jokes among working men, although I did learn a new one. All you really need to know is that everything was going smoothly. After a few days on the job, I was no longer concerned about giant dogs attacking us on the lunch break. The first Friday on the worksite wrapped up, and some of the crew were planning on meeting up at a bar just down the road. Lenny, a hulking goofball in his mid-50s, insisted that I come along. 2 hours and quite a few beers later, Lenny and I were the only remaining crew members there. I was searching for an opportunity to cut out, eager to get home to Tara and a hot shower. Lenny had other ideas. What do you think about that rumour? About the beasts? Do you think it's true? Lenny asked as he carefully put his mug back to the bar top. I doubt it. I mean, we haven't seen any evidence, right? But that's the thing. His eyes lit up like he had been anticipating this conversation from day one. We're only there during the day. Every story I've ever heard about it, the monsters only come out at night. I chuckled and shook my head. I didn't peg you as a believer in boogeymen. I'm not. But you have to admit it's creepy and interesting. I've been down here exploring myself. If I wasn't afraid of getting arrested for trespassing. He looked at me rather expectantly. I was getting the hint and it made me kind of uncomfortable. Haha, the cops scare you more than the monsters, huh? But we'd still get arrested for trespass. Ah, but here's the thing. All we gotta do is tell them we work there. That's not a lie, and we forget something on site and we're going back to get it. Lenny was practically bouncing out of his seat at this point. We went back and forth a bit before I finally gave in, mostly because I didn't want Lenny to get hurt or in trouble drunkenly stumbling around in the dark all by himself. I swear the no trespassing sign was twice as big at night, but it was probably just my guilty conscience as the alcohol messing with my head. The barriers blocking the road prevented cars from entering Lincoln Way, but really didn't do much to stop someone from just walking on in. That's exactly what we did. I blame the goosebumps on the chill in the air, but there was that nagging feeling of fear itching at the back of my mind. There was a reason that the urban legend took off the way it did. This place was fucking creepy. We stumbled around for 20 minutes, watching the best we could for tripping hazards and wishing we'd brought flashlights. Just as I started to tell Lenny that we're wasting our time, he shushed me. "Shh! Did you hear that?" he asked in a loud whisper. I didn't hear anything. "Lenny, we should go." "Shh! There's something in the woods over there." Before I could respond, Lenny took off towards one of the houses that were still mostly standing. I stood as still as I ever had, trying to hear anything other than his clumsy footsteps. I was torn. It was reasonable to believe that the noise Lenny had heard was just a raccoon or something, but the hair on the back of my neck and the sick feeling in my stomach was screaming at me to run, while I stood there and debated just how good of a friend Lenny was. I noticed he suddenly got very, very quiet. "Lenny?" I called out in the dark. "Quit screwing around." Silence. "Lenny!" I called again as I started moving towards the house. I was stopped mid-stride by a high-pitched shriek. I couldn't see a damn thing, but I could hear everything. Branches breaking, frenzied movement, a low rumble of a growl, and then an angry snarl, followed by Lenny begging God for help. Help! That's what I needed to do. I broke out of my terrified stupor and rushed around the side of the house. On my way to check the backyard, I grabbed a broken piece of wood that was leaning against the building. I was about to piss myself in fear, but damn it, I was going to defend my friend. At least, that was my intention until I turned the corner. Lenny was backed against the back wall of the house, trying to slowly inch his way towards where I was standing. In front of him stood the biggest dog I've ever seen. Except, was it a dog? Dogs don't get that big, and they don't have horns, but it looked like a dog. I mean a dog with a lot of teeth. I couldn't stop the whimper that escaped my mouth, and in a split second I went from knight in shining armour to a terrified child. The sound drew Lenny's attention, and he was about halfway through saying my first name when the dog attacked. My bladder emptied at the first bite tore into Lenny's stomach. His intestines stretched from his belly to the beast's mouth for a moment, while it swiped its massive paw across Lenny's chest, knocking my friend to the ground and leaving dark streaks across what was left of his shirt. The monster began to eat, and I was at my car door before I could even realise I was moving. I drove for about 5 minutes before I had to pull over to vomit on the side of the road. I sat in wet pants for a while and debated what I should do next. The cops probably wouldn't believe me, and I didn't want to go to jail because they figured I saw an opportunity in the legend. I could just drive home, grab Tara and run far away from that cursed street, but that plan relied on her believing me. The only thing I knew for sure was that I was never, ever going back to that job. Tara was already asleep when I got home, so at least I didn't have to explain the state of me. I didn't fall asleep at all. I checked and double-checked and triple-checked every door and window in the house, then got my hunting rifle from the safe and sat in the living room until the sun came up. I took a hot shower, slipped into bed, and waited for my wife to stir. Tara is a wonderful woman. I could tell that my sudden extreme change in demeanour worried her, but she didn't ask questions when I insisted that I was just not feeling well. I called off work on Monday and Tuesday, and then quit on Wednesday. I watched the news and scoured the internet every chance I got, expecting to find some news about finding a body behind an abandoned house on a haunted street. The only thing I ever found was a missing person post on a friend of a friend's Facebook page. I stared at Lenny's smiling face in a photo for eternity too long before I shut my laptop and cried. The houses are all gone now. replaced by broken pavement and growing grass. I ignored any and all phone calls from my former co-workers, and the police never came, so I'm assuming no one suspects that I was involved in Lenny's disappearance. There was no news of any mishaps or anything on the job site, but there was no news of Lenny either, so I guess that doesn't say much. There's talk of a housing development replacing the rows of abandoned houses, but I pray it never happens. Whatever's out there, I doubt that it left the comfort of the trees where it's apparently lived for years. Who knows? Maybe it did. There are plenty of new hunting grounds in the area. Regardless, I don't think we've seen the last of the beast of Lincoln Way. We thought they were coyotes. Let's get straight into that. We thought they were coyotes. We could hear them howl at night, yapping to one another in the dark, running through the woods behind the house. I live alone, but one weekend my brother John came to visit. We had built a fire, and I decided to go outside and grab a drink. I left my brother facing the fire, back to the woods, on an outdoor blanket I had. When I returned, he was upright, facing the woods, blanket gone, and a rake in his hands. I could tell he was alert. What the hell happened? We had heard the coyotes in the distance earlier that night, but it had been at least half an hour ago. I heard someone right behind me. I could hear their steps leave the woods and step out onto the gravel towards the fire. I jumped but didn't see anything. I think the fire had kept me from hearing the steps until it got close. The terror in his eyes, I could see it. My brother and I are both in our 20s. We're not small people, we're experienced campers, so we spent our fair share of time in the wilderness. But the look in his eyes, I hadn't seen it before. "It's pacing," he said. I stepped away from the crackling fire and took a few more steps towards the woods. My brother looked at me with caution. I nodded, signalling I wouldn't get too close. But sure enough, I could hear it. They were quiet, careful steps, barely making a sound. I understood then why he didn't hear the steps until they were right up on him. The fire could easily drown them out, if you weren't listening careful. But this sound travelled side to side on the property. As careful as they were, you could make out the direction. "Is it a person?" I asked. "I don't know. I don't think so." A limb snapped. Our heads turned in sync towards the woods. "Well, whatever it is, it's cautious. It doesn't seem to be leaving the tree line." Neither of us said it. But I have to doubt we were both thinking, whatever it was smart enough to wait and attempt approaching when one of us was alone and had our back to the woods. We decided to try and spot who or what. We cut off our flashlights. The fire had died down to just embers. We would wait until we heard the now periodic but consistent light snapping of a limb in the tree line. Then we'd flood the area with light, hoping to catch them in the process. They were careful, so we would be too. We lit a cigarette while we waited, listening. Sure enough, the snap came, louder this time. They were closer. My brother nodded, light on, but discouragingly, so nothing. We attempted this several times, from multiple angles. Nothing. "I don't think this was a person, John," I told him. "We would have seen them by now, unless they was on their hands and knees, but then it would be impossible for them to be pacing so quietly." "I agree. And it's no dog. At least that's not a domesticated one. You know that sound. The curious sniffing, tail wagging, hitting trees as they passed, and the occasional piss on a log. This was no dog. Whatever it is, it's on the hunt." He confirmed in my own thoughts. Whatever it was sizing us up, pacing, quietly pacing, not getting close enough to be seen, but close enough. We knew it was there. We decided to have a seat facing the woods and lay a few more logs on the fire, in case it was the light attracting it. I suppose it could be a coyote, but they've never come this close, and never alone, I told him. When we've heard them, they're usually on the move and together, never less than 3 or 4, that I would guess. It was approaching midnight, and we were getting tired and bored of our cigarettes. I was about to light my last one, when I saw it. It had made its first mistake. Perhaps it was the sound of my lighter, or the flicker of the light in the distance. Regardless, I had caught its attention. Through the trees, I saw its eyes. 2 bright eyes flickered in the dark, reflecting the light of the fire to its right. Still, carefully hidden with the tree line, I could make out a silhouette, but its eyes they couldn't hide. There! There, John! Its eyes! Do you see it? I did, and that's clearly not a person. It most certainly wasn't, I thought to myself. Red, dark and bright all at once, and several feet off the ground. Neither of us needed to say it, but it was all too familiar, as if this night had happened before in some strange way, and it had. Several years ago, while we were still in high school and driving home through the countryside, bright yet dark red eyes carefully walked out of the woods. My headlights had to yet reveal who the eyes were. As we began to approach the mysterious beast, John spoke up. Stop the car! Him being my younger brother, I was usually the assertive one, but this time, hand near the wheel, I could tell he was frightened. The light was just at the feet of the creature, but we could make out enough. Its eyes stayed glued on us. It didn't run. It moved at a slow, casual pace, but its feet, its body, in fact, remained a shadow, despite it nearing the headlights, despite it being in range of the porch light to the house nearby. Its legs, you could tell they were moving, but it was a blur of movement that didn't match its speed. It was as if it was swimming across the pavement. Its outline favoured a wolf, but its movement, its stare, did not. We sat silent as it crossed both lanes. Once it approached the other side of the road, it slowly turned its head towards the field of weeds and began to disappear from view. Go! John's assertive voice broke the silence. Without thought or question, I listened. As we drove away, I couldn't help but wonder if he noticed it too. The weeds, they didn't move as it entered the field. It was as if the creature had never left the road. The rest of the ride home that night was bitter and cold. You could almost taste it. What do you think that was, John? I don't know. Neither of us had anything else to say about it. That night, it has haunted us. It was no animal. It was no trick of the light. And this thing was all too familiar. No tree had moved at its pace. No light ever revealed its silhouette or shadow. The only thing that had given it away was the sound of its steps and its glowing eyes in the distance. We decided to call it a night. The pacing had faded off a bit, to the point where we hadn't heard the rhythmic snapping of a limb in some time, and the fire was once again dying down. Despite all this, we sat there in the grass, staring at the woods, quiet and still. And there was a chill in the air on this summer night. That's when it happened. The embers were barely burning, but we could see it, an all too familiar sight. It was as if a shadow had manifested into a being. It favoured that of a wolf, but its movement was fluid. Once again, as if it was moving underwater, it squinted, thinking the smoke had blurred my vision. I was always the curious one, but my brother, he was cautious. Don't move. He grabbed my arm. He knew what I was thinking. I was about to stand, get a better view at what had finally stepped out of the woods. It continued to walk carefully, approaching the fire. Its eyes glowed so bright, it was as if they had burst into flames themselves. The closer it got, my stomach dropped, and my brother gulped. It was big, bigger than we had anticipated. I had seen wolves, up close and in person. I'd seen bears. This was more like a hybrid of the two. But one thing that bothered me, its breath. It had none. It had no movement of breathing. The smoke didn't bend to its exhale. Its back never did rise or fall. This thing, as fluid as it was with its approach, it wasn't breathing. Was it even alive? Surely it knows we're still here. John half stated, half asked. I don't know that it does. It could be the smoke disguising our smell and the fire distracting its view. No. It knew we were there. That was the first time we saw it react. Its head jerked in our direction. I felt my face flush within seconds. My heart was pounding. My brother and I had the same reaction. Our hands instantly went to the ground, feet uncrossed and level. He, ready to grab the rake, and I had taken a deep breath, ready to yell. I don't know how much experience you have with wildlife and the outdoors, but if you are approached in a threatening manner by a bear or wolf, you don't run. You stand your ground. You make yourself known. You clap, you yell, you wave your arms. Our own instincts had kicked in, and we were ready, but it was going to be hard. I had fought off wolves from a camp in Colorado. I have successfully avoided bears on the Appalachian Trail, and not once was I afraid. I've had experience. But this thing, it had me frightened. It was patient, smart, consistent, and it had waited for us to grow tired, anxious, and think perhaps it had left, so we could turn our backs to go. It knew when to show its face, and we were scared. The moment it took its first step towards us, John was on his feet, rake in hand. I followed suit, stomping about and giving my best war cry. This thing didn't budge. One step, carefully taken by one and another. Blood-curdling screams, then seconds later, it came towards us like a ticking of a clock. At one point, I vaguely remember looking to John, and he looked at me. My heart sank. I'd seen that look before. I was 12, he was 8. We had just jumped onto the back of Grandpa's truck without him knowing. And he picked up speed, and I screamed to John to hold on. Luckily, someone yelled from the porch for him to stop. We were losing our grip. That juvenile look, sheer terror, was written on his face. I shook my head. He knew what it meant. This thing couldn't give a fuck what we were doing. It didn't growl, and it continued seemingly not to breathe. And it didn't flinch. It was nothing. It did nothing but close the gap between us. Fuck it, I thought. I charged forward. My adrenaline was at its height. If I went for it, it meant John had a chance to get away. Whatever it wasn't backing down. That's the last thing that I remember. After then, the faint echo of John's voice. It sounded as if he was coming from the other side of the valley and bouncing off the edges of the lake. The next thing I remember is the ground beneath me, wet from the morning dew. I was on my back, the wet grass cold to my fingertips, and I was no longer in the backyard. I was lying down by the side of the house, feet pointed towards the driveway. Fuck, John! John! I ran for the back of the house and towards the woods, the sun's light barely peeking over the mountains. Over here! I was never so glad to hear that punk's voice. He wasn't far from where we had the fire, picking himself off the ground as I had. What the hell, man? What happened? He breathed shallow and put up one finger to signal for me to wait, his eyes looking left and right, as if he was reading a prompter. He was remembering. Oh my God. I followed his eyes. The tree line was no longer a line. The ashes of the fire were scattered. They covered half the yard, and the tree several feet deep of the tree line was gone. There were no logs left behind, no scattered limbs. They were just gone. The only thing that remained were 25 to 30 jagged stumps surrounded by ash. They didn't burn, did they, John? His eyes were glossy as he turned to face me. He stumbled on his words, one hand pointing a shaky finger in my direction, the other covering his mouth. What, John? What the fuck happened? It took him some time to get out. My brother, he is the smarter of the two of us, I know that. Full ride scholarship to university based on his ACT scores alone. He's logical, a rational man, but this, what we were seeing, wasn't rational at all. I could see his mind bending at the sight. He proceeded to tell me. As I lunged at the creature, he reached to stop me, but I left his grasp. It was as if I began to climb the invisible stairwell, up and over the creature. Each step I took went further and further from the ground. I levitated over the shadow being above the fire, and that's when he lost sight of me. I disappeared with the smoke. Before he could react, the creature was face to face with him, right up on its back legs. My brother is a solid 6'2". This creature looked down on him, its touch like ice. Being the nerd he was, he said it was like liquid nitrogen. You could feel it, like a touch or embrace, but you felt the cold. I think it attempted to speak to me. Its mouth opened, but I heard nothing except for the sound of wind. It could be its voice at a frequency we can't comprehend. I listened in amazement. I don't think it was trying to hurt us, Ira. I think it was testing us. Seeing if we were afraid. I think it was trying to communicate. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to that? Then what, John? It talked, I think. And then I woke up there. He pointed out the window of my kitchen, exactly where I was standing. I must have collapsed. That's all I remember. What do you make of this? I flailed my hands towards the woods. I'm not sure. Given the ashes surrounding the trees, one would think they burned down. But that's impossible, I replied. Exactly. And the stumps, they weren't burned down. Ira, they were torn down. I can see that, but what happened to the rest of it? How the fuck should I know? He was exhausted, or rather his mind was. I don't expect you to know. I was just thinking out loud here, alright? We both were exhausted. The more I moved, the more the pain came back. My back was bruised. I'm assuming from my landing in a side yard. My arms were sore, as if I had been lifting for hours that night. My legs were weak, and my stomach, well, I couldn't keep anything down for the next few days. John was a little more fortunate. Other than a little hit to the head or sore knee from collapsing, he was alright. At first. It took 3 weeks, but slowly the nosebleeds started, typically in the middle of the night. Are you getting these too? I wish I could have told him I was, but I wasn't. My bruises had healed. The soreness faded. His nosebleeds, they were consistent. Every other night. For 2 weeks, he woke up to bloody sheets and a bloody pillow. Why don't you go to the doctor, John? I did. They told me to lay off the cigarettes and take a Zytec. I couldn't help but laugh, but the humour faded quickly. You think it has something to do with that night, don't you? He didn't have to answer. I could see it on his face. He managed a slow nod, accompanied by a blank stare into the distance. Yeah, I still see it too, I told him, trying to sound comforting. I felt stupid after I'd said it. That isn't comforting. That's frightening as hell. Seeing that thing everywhere. It's still trying to talk to me. Ira, every night I get these nosebleeds. I see it. In my dreams. It's glaring down at me. Its hollow, empty voice. Roaring in my ear. I think it wants something from me, but I don't know what it is. And it's getting angrier and angrier each time. Hot tears rolled down his cheeks. His knuckles grew white from clenching his fists. That's all I have. I wish I had more to tell you, but I don't. Other than we thought they were coyotes. More of them have showed up, crawling out of the woods. I see them from my back porch. They never go past the tree line, or what's left of it. But they're there, eyes glowing, that dark yet bright, ominous red. I just wish I knew if they were real or not. I am not the only one who's seen them since that night. They say curiosity killed the cat. I fear it will get the better of me. I want to be afraid. I wish I was more afraid, but I can't help but feel they're waiting for me. A new one joins them every other day or so, and they're growing in numbers. It's up to at least 15 now. Will it make it to 16? Wow. Hope you guys enjoyed those 2 very scary stories there, with a sort of a Dogman or Werewolf type of flex going on. Of course, please do let me know down below in the comments as ever. Please do like and share. If you haven't subscribed to DMT, please do smash the subscribe button and kick the notification bell into the stratosphere to stay up to date with all DMT content. We've got some true encounter stories coming up this week for you guys, so do stay tuned for that. And as I say, lots and lots of stuff going on in the background, a website with a blog and various other stuff. Hopefully some merchandise in the next couple of months. And remember guys, whenever you're sitting around a lovely warm, glowing, crackling campfire, when you're hearing twigs and limbs breaking off in the distance around you, it could be a possum, it could be a badger or a fox. Or then again, it could be something altogether different. Whatever you do, remember, be safe, not sorry.